Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to SciFiDevCon. My name is Allon Mureinik, and I work for Synopsys, where I manage R&D for the Seeker agents. Seeker, if you haven't heard about it, or rather haven't heard about it yet, is probably the best IAST interactive application security testing tool out there today. But as fascinating as application security can be in general, and as fascinating as IAST is specifically, it's just not my topic today, so this is the last time I'm going to mention it. My talk today is called Injustice, Developers Among Us, and I want to kick it off with a confession. I really like stories about alternate timelines. I know this might be controversial. I know some of you just can't stand them, and I get it. I really do. At worst, alternate timelines are cop-outs. They're often excuses for poor writing, for writers who didn't pay attention or couldn't be bothered to pay attention to the overall continuity, and who just like to do their own thing and the rest of the franchise be damned. I totally get that. But at best, alternate timelines can be brilliant storytelling devices. They're excellent opportunities for the writers to explore some aspect or some idea, and we DC fans aren't allowed to say this, but ask the question, what if? And one of these best alternate timeline or alternate continuity stories that I've recently read, recently being the last 2 decades, but recently, is the Injustice storyline. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with it, I don't want to spoil it too much, but the premise, in a very shallow, very hollow way, is that the Joker decides he's working too hard and he needs a holiday. Fighting Batman all the time is way too difficult because, well, he's Batman, and the Joker needs a vacation. So for his vacation, he decides to punch down and take on a lesser adversary than Batman. So if you're the Joker and you're used to fighting Batman all the time, how do you punch down? You go take on Superman, clearly. And again, don't want to spoil this too much, but the Joker tricks Superman, has him kill Lois Lane, has him destroy Metropolis, and basically breaks him. Superman goes off the deep end, more or less, and decides he can't hold himself back anymore. He needs to take the kid gloves off. And he's going to make sure we get world peace by any force necessary, and essentially makes himself a tyrant and the Justice League, whoever remains in it, his own private army. And the fun part about this, that it's not a four-color story. So in the comics fandom, we often call old school superhero comics four colors or four-color stories. That's how they printed them back then. That's what the printing technology was capable of doing. But figuratively speaking, the golden age, old school comics from back then, were very clear-cut. The heroes were heroes, they were always good. truth, justice, and the American way of life. The villains were villains, they were always bad, they were out to take over the world and destroy and kill everyone. And you had nothing in between. Good was good, bad was bad. No moral ambiguity, no place to think who's right and who's wrong. And injustice isn't a story like that. It's a spectrum. It isn't just an alternate continuity that says, haha, let's take the greatest superhero ever, Superman, and let's make him bad just for fun and giggles. No, it's a whole spectrum of gray. Superman in the story isn't evil because he's evil. Superman in the story, in his own mind, is a hero. He's saving the world from villains like the Joker. But to us, to the reader, Superman is very much the villain of the story. He is taking over the world. There's room for a lot of nuance here, which is really what makes this story so compelling. But, well, this isn't Comic-Con, it's still a tech conference, and perhaps it's a good thing this isn't Comic-Con, because I can go on and on about injustice for probably the whole day, and if you really twist my arm, probably the whole week, when no one really has time for that, right? So let's rein it in. Let's remember this is a tech conference. This is SciFiDevCon, emphasis being not on the sci-fi, but on the DevCon. So I'm not going to talk about superheroes or supervillains who think that they are superheroes anymore. I'm going to talk about developers. I'm going to talk about developers who may be perceived as villains by others, but for them, it's not about being evil. I think very few, if any, real life people set out to be villains, set out to be the bad person. It's not about being evil, it's about being oblivious. I want to talk about the developers that most of us know, most of us have met. To be completely fair, most of us have probably been. I know I definitely have been most of these developers in some stage or another of my career. I want to talk about these developers who are oblivious, who are the heroes of their own story in their own minds, but who could be perceived as villains, or if not supervillains, if not bad people, just as being super annoying and super unpleasant to work with by others. So, what am I talking about? Who are these villainous, or at least obliviously villainous developers? Let's see some examples. Let's start with the obvious. If you want, the chief villain of Injustice, or at least of the first couple of stories of the Injustice timeline. Superman. And we've all worked with Superman. We all know this one developer who's super smart, super experienced, probably has been on the team for longer than anyone, and is just so good and so much better than everyone else around him. And anything he does is always top-notch quality. And this is why most, or commonly, all the really difficult and all the really important tasks get assigned to them, because, again, they are so much better than everyone. On face value, this sounds great. We have someone on the team who's really good, who can really tackle the difficult problems, we can turn to him in a crunch. What's wrong with that? Well, the problem with that is that sooner or later this Superman starts buying into his own or their own hype. And sooner or later you will get to the point where it's not only that this Superman is the one who does the hard tasks or the important critical tasks, it's that no one else can. And in the worst cases where no one else can do anything without this Superman being involved. In the long term, this means that we aren't really growing our quote unquote next generation of developers. We aren't giving opportunity to anyone new to grow and develop, but even in the short term, this means we are putting all the eggs in one basket. There's a very disturbing metaphor that you often use. It's called the bus factor, which asks how many people need to be run over by a bus before your team is incapacitated. In the case of a Superman, if this bus is loaded with kryptonite and it incapacitates Superman, the answer is 1. This makes our team really, really fragile. Now, quite often, we don't have buses full of kryptonite driving around, but the Superman isn't like his comic book counterpart. He can get sick. He can want to take time off. He or she could have family obligations. And if we continue relying on this Superman and we create a culture where no one else can tackle the really hard stuff other than Superman, we're also creating a culture where Superman has a sense of duty. They can't take time off. They can't afford to be sick because nothing will happen when they're gone, which may hold on for a while, but sooner or later the Superman will get frustrated, they will get burned out, and sooner or later they will leave because nobody here does any work except me, and now you're again stuck without a Superman after years where you were stunting the growth of everyone around Superman. How do we deal with this? Well, in the comics, kryptonite. In the real world, please do not poison your top developer with alien radioactive substances. It is not a good solution. It, at the very least, is immoral and probably illegal in most countries. Please do not do this. What can you do, though? First of all, take the Superman aside, sit them down, and talk to them. If they really are this senior, super experienced developer, they will get it. They probably will not change their behavior by a flick of your finger, but they will get it and they will at least be open to feedback and open to working on this problem. Second, deliberately spread the difficult critical tasks around. In the short term, you will have some very important tasks that were not handled in the best possible fashion because Superman could have done a better job, but Superman did not work on them, you did not assign this to Superman, you pawned it off to the Green Lantern. In the short term, you will get lesser quality of work. In the long term, you are teaching your Green Lantern and your Supergirl and your Aquaman and what have you how to ramp up. Also, and this is critical, quite often Superman will be very motivated and will want to be involved in everything, which again, on its own is a good thing. No, it's not a good thing. It's a great thing. Motivation is excellent. You want to cultivate this, not to stunt it. But you don't want to get to a place where everything is blocked because it's waiting for Superman. One really easy way to address this is to have strict deadlines. And I mean really strict deadlines. Deadlines that cannot be broken, cannot be bent, cannot be negotiated with. Strict. Once you have these in place, by all means, sit Superman down and have a talk. Even Superman, with all of his superpowers, must come to a realization that there are just that many hours a day and that many workdays a week or a month. But again, we want to empower our developers. Here too, we want to empower Superman. Hey, Superman, here's everything on our plate. Here are the deadlines. You choose. You choose what you want to be hands-on with, what you want to advise on, what you want to review, and what you say, sorry, it's just that many hours a day. Aquaman and Green Lantern can handle this without me, or will have to handle this without me. I just do not have the time. It's going to be a hard transition, but sooner or later you will get there and you will have a whole Justice League of superhero developers, not only ready, not only motivated, but capable of doing the work. If Superman gets involved, great, the work could be better. Does he have to be involved in every little thing? Probably not. So, Superman, that one was obvious. Who else do we have in Injustice? Another obvious example is the Flash. The Flash can do things really fast, super fast. He's the fastest man alive. As a developer, this is usually a positive quality. If we can do the same thing faster or slower, we'd probably prefer to do it faster, right? Fast is good. But the problem starts when the Flash you have on your team prioritize speed at the expense of everything else, which more often than not means doing sloppy work. So the Flash did whatever feature they were working on really fast, but did they consider any security implications? Did they double check that they aren't introducing a performance regression? Are there any backwards compatibility issues here? Maybe they were able to code this feature in 2 hours, but in doing so, the system's resource requirement doubled itself. So great, it's fast, but is it good? Not always. And that can be a problem. What do we do with this? First of all, if you can, direct your Flash to use his or their powers for good. Sometimes speed is the only thing that matters. If you need to prototype something, it doesn't need to be great. It needs to be fast. It needs to prove a point, so show something is doable or feasible. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just get it done and prove the point. Flash would be great for that. Do you need to solve a critical problem at a customer site? The Flash would be great for that. The customer only wants us to work. If you've broken his system, they want it back up. Does it have something unstable somewhere else, an overhead of maintenance? Nobody cares. The damn thing is broken right now. Have the Flash bring it up, deal with the fallout later. If you can, and this is generally good advice for all the developers we're going to talk about here, direct the powers for good. When the Flash's superpower aligns with what you want to achieve, this is a match made in heaven. Let's do that. If you can't, build safeguards around the Flash. And the trick here is not to slow the Flash down. That could be possible, but that's a wasted opportunity. Again, you do want to benefit from the Flash's speed. So the trick isn't to slow the Flash down. It's to make sure that the work the Flash is doing is up to your standard. And when I say make sure the work is up to a standard, I mean automatically. You cannot rely on anyone else to peer review or assure this quality, because the Flash is the fastest man alive. Anyone else involved would be slowing them down. So we have to have all of this automated. We have to have anything, any collateral consideration that we care about automated. In fact, I would take this a step further. I would argue that if you have not automated some concern, you do not really care about it. Do you care about security? Excellent. You should have your SAST and your DAST and your SCA and hopefully your IAST as part of your build pipeline. If security testing isn't part of your pipeline, you can't really claim you care about it. Do you care about performance? Great. You need to have an automated performance test that runs as part of your pipeline. Do you care about backwards compatibility? Fantastic. Have explicit testing for it. If it's not automatically tested, if it's not automatically supervised, you can't claim that you care about it. You'd be sad if it's broken and you'd be annoyed, but if you haven't put in the resources to automatically test it, do you really care about it? Is this really a consideration? No, it's an aspiration. Is this perfect? Of course not. You can always have your dedicated pen testing to make sure that security is on point. You can always have your dedicated load testing to make sure that the performance is good. You can always have your UI review to make sure the UI is as comfortable and as accessible as possible. But those can be out-of-band things, and you can always explicitly improve on them. But the base level, the base acceptance test has to be automated, because otherwise it's slowing everyone down, not just the Flash. It has to be up to standard. Your security test needs to be able to say it is good enough with the tools we have, with our SAST and our DAST and our SCA and our IAST. You think you've ran all of these and your application is not secure? Probably not. You need better tooling. You have a performance test, but you don't trust it, so why do you have it? Your automated tests, your build pipeline should be your base level that you can agree is good enough, and the Flash can move as fast as he wants as long as he adheres to this baseline of acceptance testing. Once you have all that in place, you may find that the Flash is indeed the fastest man alive and is moving as fast as he wants. But once you have all this infrastructure in place, you will find that the rest of your team is also moving so much faster and with so much less so much less self-doubt and self-questioning. Let's see another couple of superheroes. Let's talk about the atom. The atom can shrink down into minute sizes. This is why he's called the atom. And he can look at very small details very deeply. Is this in itself a problem? Again, no. In itself, the ability to focus down and drill into the smallest of details is a good thing. And you want your developers to make sure that you have all your T's crossed and your I's dotted before you before you ship, anything. But when you have someone like the atom that always does this, is this the best behavior? Probably not. First of all, at the very least, this usually comes at the expense of the atom's own time. So the atom built a new feature, and now he sits down and tests it on Linux and on macOS and on Windows. And all of this is multiplied by doing the testing once for x86 and once for ARM processors, which is all great, which is all valid and valuable testing. But do you really need to do that if all you did was change a color in the GUI from blue to green? Probably not. Probably not the best investment of time. Even worse, when you have this atom who starts bogging down on the small details, what atoms do, they tend to bring in other people. They tend, well, we have a dilemma here. Let's bring in our product manager and our UX designer and my team lead and the UX designer's team lead, and let's all have a big meeting and discuss what exactly we want to do, what text needs to show up in this corner case where you're trying to run your system on Windows 98. Now, the true answer for this in the real world is probably nobody cares. This will happen once in a blue moon, if even. We can have some generic text there. If you want to waste your time figuring out the best phrasing, that's okay, but now you've just wasted the time of 5 different people on this. And even more time coordinating between all of them, because maybe we don't all live in the same time zone. It is just not worth it. It is the reverse flash, if you will. There is intrinsic value in moving, if not as fast as possible, in a sufficiently fast pace, and not every minor detail is always worth all of the time and energy invested in it. How do we handle these atoms? Well, paradoxically, we empower them. First of all, we want to make it very, very, very super even clear how we do things. What is our acceptable, or what is our, acceptance criteria? Given this acceptance criteria, you sometimes don't need to pull other people in, because it is very obvious. The atom is empowered if they want to dig into the details, but at the end of the day, whatever details they come up with, if it matches this criteria, it is good enough to ship. kind of like with the Flash, make this criteria automated. Okay, your atom has a concern that we're adding a feature that might add some overhead to the system. Great. It's a good thing you noticed, and great job you thought about it. We have automated performance tests. If it passes the test, it is good enough to ship. Do you want to sit down and improve performance here? Okay, let's discuss. Let's see if it's worth prioritizing or not. But without that, we have the automated performance test. It is good enough. You can ship it. Now, this deals with the atom's tendency to bog down on details and waste their own time. How do we make sure the atom doesn't waste anyone else's time? A very, maybe dirty, but very useful hack for that is to not always be available, or even to always be unavailable. Whenever an atom comes up to you and says, "Hey, Allon, I'm working on XYZ, I need 5 minutes of your time to discuss." Great. Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for bringing this up. I think this is really important. Unfortunately, I'm really in the middle of something. Let me get back to you when I'm done. It will probably take me an hour or two, regardless of whether you're busy or not. 70, 80, 90% of the time, this problem will miraculously disappear because they figured it out. If they haven't, chances are it's really an important problem that really deserves everyone's time. And good show. Kudos to the atom for noticing this. Kudos for recognizing it. And by all means, let's discuss and let's find the best solution for this. Some problems are indeed difficult, and that's okay. Let's move on to some more obscure comic book characters. Let's talk about Azrael. Azrael hears voices. Azrael is on a mission from God to, well, in his case, to rid Gotham City of evil. But in our case, when we're figuratively talking about developers, Azrael is on a mission from God, or more commonly, a mission from the voices he hears in his own head, which is himself thinking, about something probably obscure that probably few people care about. Doesn't mean that this is something wrong or invalid or not intrinsically valuable by its own right. It usually is, and this is what makes Azrael a tricky character. Again, it's not, we aren't dealing in four-color superheroes, we're dealing in real life. Azrael's mission from God is probably something that is valuable, but he's the only one who hears these voices. Azrael is the only person who really cares about this. Now, the problem, usually we want to encourage people to care about things, to deeply care about things. The problem starts when Azrael's own self-imposed mission becomes everything to them. When it makes them incapable of doing anything else, incapable of dealing with the concrete problems we need to solve right now. You'd usually hear something like this. Hey, Azrael, we have a performance bottleneck in feature XYZ, which is really important to our customer ABC. Can you help me solve this? No, I cannot help you. It's the wrong thing. Solving this bottleneck is the wrong thing to do. What we should be doing is thinking about how to make our entire system horizontally scalable, and then these performance bottlenecks will just disappear. Now, this is technically true, and this is what's frustrating about dealing with Azrael. He is correct, but it doesn't really matter. Making the entire system horizontally scalable is potentially a fool's errand that can take months to do. And on the other hand, we have a really specific bottleneck, which is causing problems for specific paying customer right now, and we can solve this within a day. Will it be something perfect and beautiful and horizontally scalable? It won't. Will it solve the actual problem? It will. And Azraels, even though they're heroes in their own mind, are sometimes incapable of seeing this. How do we deal with them? We make them buy into things. And I used to have a really obvious textbook Azrael in one of my teams a couple of employers ago. And my manager would always say, sit down, talk to him, understand why he's right, because he's always right, and then explain to him why he's wrong. The trick to deal with Azrael is not to invalidate his life's mission. It's to buy into it, but to buy into it in baby steps. So yes, we want to make our system horizontally scalable, but we can't shut everything down and work on nothing but that. How do we take baby steps towards that? Here's a concrete problem. How do we solve that? And by solving it, take a small step towards this end goal. And in that way, you harness Azrael and all of his superpowers, because usually they are very, very good developers, to solve concrete problems that you do have while working towards some longer-term end goal. If you ever get there, great. Usually, again, this goal is not wrong. And if you don't get there, that's also fine, because all of these small baby steps you took on the way have their own intrinsic value. Let's talk about some more far-fetched ideas like that. Let's talk about Brainiac 5, not to be confused with Brainiac. Brainiac 5 is from the future. Brainiac 5 is the developer who always wants to get the latest and greatest technologies, the thing he saw at a conference, the infrastructure he read a blog post about, the library he saw a demo of. He's always putting in the newest technology. And again, in its own right, this is great. If you're a tech company, no one starts a tech company by saying, I want to work with the oldest and most boring technology possible. We want to use the newer technology. We want to get its benefits. This makes Brainiac a hero, like everyone else in this talk. What makes him less of a hero is if Brainiac 5 starts pulling in technology for the sake of pulling in technology. The way to combat this is to make them do the work or do the homework. You want to move over to Kubernetes to manage our cloud? Great. Do your homework. Have a study, see what actual problems we have, quantify them, and show how moving to this new technology can solve them. Even if it can't, it's a net benefit. We got a good analysis of the current problems, and maybe we can brainstorm about how to fix them in some other way. If this new technology does indeed solve them, great, let's pull it in. If it maybe solves them and maybe not, and we're unsure about it, okay, we are grown-ups. We can have a nuanced discussion about this and question if it's worth the effort or not. As long as we aren't blindly running into new technology just for the sake of saying we're running on new technology, by all means, empower Brainiac. But again, have him do the work. Have him prove that this new technology will indeed solve a problem we have, improve on some behavior, make our lives better by some actual metric, not just the publication year. And last but not least, we have Batman. No, I'm just kidding. Batman's awesome. I have nothing negative to say about Batman. Jokes aside, let's wrap up. If you take anything from this talk, please remember that real life is not a comic book. Moreover, it is most definitely not a full-color comic book. Even if you're working with people who come across as annoying, who come across as doing the wrong thing, who empirically, when you work with them, make your day worse, try not to villainize them. There are very, very few people who proactively set out to be villains, who proactively set out to make your life worse. Chances are they're the hero of their own story. Chances are that, like you, they are trying to make the world a better place for themselves, for the people that work with them. They may make mistakes on the way. So chances are they don't even realize they're making mistakes. Chances are, in their own story, you're the villain. Talk to them. Understand where they're coming from. Sometimes it's just a miscommunication. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes people have different priorities, different sensibilities. But even if they do, don't villainize people. Talk to them, work together, see how you can harness their powers for the greater good. With that, I think I'm done. If any of this resonates with you, I'd invite you not to be a stranger. I'm not a hard person to find. My contact info is up here. I'll be sharing the slides. It's going to be on them too. Reach out. Let's continue this conversation. Having said that, the one last thing I have to say is, of course, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Thanks for having me. And enjoy the rest of SciFiDevCon.